following program is intended for mature audiences.
What do you say we have a rock and roll party?
You're listening to Basically a Sports Show.
Follow us on Twitter at Basically Sports.
Subscribe to our podcast on iTunes.
And download every episode and more at basicallyasportshow.com.
Now here's your hosts, Zach,
Greg, Mike.
And you're listening to Basically a Sports Show.
Okay, let's do it. Let's talk Stanley Cup Playoffs, which start tomorrow, correct?
Yeah, tomorrow. Tomorrow, we got 5 series that start up on Wednesday, the other 3 on Thursday, and plenty of coverage, plenty of Canadian teams that are also
five
in the first round.
Yeah, Mike, your Blue Jackets. Jeez, then I was going to say your Blue Jays. I'll get it on the third try here. Your Maple Leafs make the playoffs this year. Nice. I think 95 points, right?
95.
Not bad.
Went from worst in the league last year to making the playoffs, so that's not bad.
Not bad at all. Some of my Columbus Blue Jackets, 100 and what they finished, 108, 103? 103.
108 points, 3 points behind the Pittsburgh Penguins, who they get to play in the first round because of playoff format.
Which I don't like, but what are you going to do?
Yeah, and let's pour a little out for the Islanders and Lightning, both missing the playoffs by 1 point, despite furious rushes at the end of the season.
I feel for the Islanders because I generally like them, but
I do too.
But Tampa, as I was telling Zach off mic, your play-by-play guy on the radio has made me hate you now, so I'm glad that his season's ended early.
Yeah, Greg, if you ever want to torture our listeners or yourself, go look up the vocal stylings of Dave Mishkin.
Is he the guy that does all the crazy goal calls?
He's the guy that just yells into his microphone.
Okay.
He screams a lot.
Score! Score! Lightning score!
Oh, yeah.
Lightning score!
Yeah.
Steven Stamkos! Lightning score! And it's 5-2
In
October or in November.
Yeah. It'll be 5-2 over the Coyotes in November. It's calm down, guys. It's going to be okay.
And other fun fact: the Lightning and Islanders both finished with more wins than your Maple Leafs, Mike. So, all hail
you know
that
what?
point.
I didn't create the playoff system, so.
No, you didn't. No,
I would like it. I'm sure you guys agree, but I would like it a lot better if they went back to the old 1 through 8 seeding, regardless of division and all that stuff, right?
Yeah, they did this to try and spur on rivalries, and we get it in some places where you get Pittsburgh, Columbus, and you get Chicago, Nashville is a good one, but it also breaks down when things kind of fall apart on the last day of the season. So there is no Battle of Ontario because the Maple Leafs choked away a 2-goal lead on Sunday. So the Maple Leafs get to play the Capitals instead of the Senators.
Oh, we'll get to the Battle of Ontario eventually.
And, the Ducks kind of spoil things by continuing to win. So they won the division and didn't set up a Battle of California and a Battle of Alberta. So it almost worked in some places, but it didn't in others. And I don't know. I like kind of building the rivalries in the playoffs with your divisional opponents, but also you get tired of seeing the same people.
Right.
And at the end of the day, just because teams are in the same division doesn't mean they're rivals.
Exactly.
Hypothetically, you could see a scenario where, say, the Maple Leafs play the Florida Panthers in the playoffs because they're in the same division. And it's yes, longtime rivals of the Toronto Maple Leafs, the Florida Panthers. Let's get this on.
Don't they also it's an unbalanced schedule, right? Or don't you play your division more than you play everybody else?
Yes.
So that's my problem with it, is that you've got the Jackets and the Penguins play enough already. And granted, it's just the way it turned out in the standings that they play each other this time around, but it would be nice. And am I wrong if the Jackets have now made the playoffs 3 times and have played Pittsburgh every single time?
They've made the playoffs 3 times, played Pittsburgh twice, Detroit the first.
Oh, that's right. Okay. But Anyway, hey, you know what though? It's good that they're here.
And when it comes down to making rivalries, the Ducks ended up playing the Red Wings a shit ton when in the old schedule. And it's not like we're divisional opponents or even long, historical rivals, but we became rivals because we kept meeting in the playoffs, and that was under the old format. So now it's like, we're gonna play the Flames, and we've played the Flames a lot. And even though they're a divisional opponent, I generally don't have too much animosity towards them, although I do now because fuck Mark Giordano and fuck the Flames.
Brian Burke Cup. Let's get it on.
Yeah, there's that. But it's like, I think I had to double check. I think the way it worked out in the West, that even if it was back to the 1 through 8 with the division winners still getting the top 2 seeds, the West actually works out where these are what the matchups would have been anyway.
Okay.
In the old form. In the East, you get the things like the 200-point teams in Pittsburgh and Columbus playing each other, or the 102-point Rangers. They were ahead of the Montreal for a while, but now they're still playing each other. Whereas Ottawa and Boston go against each other, and it has its flaws, it has its positives, but I would be better because the other thing for like a casual fan that comes in, sometimes it's still hard to explain to them exactly how the format works. And even on like a couple of hockey podcasts I listen to, there's one group of guys that they're huge hockey fans. They follow it all the time. But when they're talking about it, they end up like, wait, is this who they're going to be playing? I don't And, you think that's something that somebody that talks about the league all the time should know. But it even confuses longtime fans. So I don't know.
Well, anyway, I think we've got some very interesting first-round matchups here going into this whole thing. Where do we want to start?
Let's start in the East, and because it's been a long time coming, Mike, your Maple Leafs in the playoffs, and their reward for making the playoffs for the first time in a long time is the Washington Capitals, the President's Trophy winners, a team with a lot of history on its back. That I think this is the best the Capitals have been with this group, and I think.
We said that last year, and then we said it the year before that.
Yeah, but I really think that this is the best that they've been, and I also really think this simply the hungriest that they've been. Like if they don't do it now, they need to blow it up, and I think they'll have an easy time with the Leafs. I think maybe the Leafs could win 2 games at most, but I think Washington will have an easy time with them ultimately. And look. Really, what happens with the Washington Capitals' ultimate playoff fate is probably going to be determined in the Pittsburgh-Columbus series if they have to play the Penguins. I don't know, but I don't know. I think the Capitals will make easier work of your Leafs, unfortunately.
Well, the good news is that when Babcock first signed with Toronto, he said this wasn't going to be an overnight thing. He said it was going to be a process. They were basically going to build the entire team up from scratch again.
I believe he said there was going to be pain.
There is going to be pain, is what he said. Yes.
Well, 95 points in a playoff appearance after year 1. That's a lot of pain to endure.
Well,
Jeez.
This is year 2 or 3.
Year 2. No, this is year 2. This is year 2. Last year was the first year, and last year was painful.
That's
yes,
right.
But,
I'm thinking. Yeah. Okay, you're right.
But my so basically going back to that, I expected the bad season last year. Really wasn't all that bothered by it, honestly. Was expecting things to be interesting this season. I expected the Leafs to be fun. Didn't expect them to make the playoffs. At the end of the day, I honestly am just happy to be here because this unexpected run doesn't really change my overall opinion on the team. I'm still kind of looking at this as a thing where they'll be serious contenders in a couple more years, just not now. So just the fact that they made it this far, I'm happy about.
Well, something else you should think about, too, is that we saw this with Columbus a couple years ago where they were kind of a team on the rise like that, and they got there, and you thought, okay, this is the beginning, and then it just completely fell apart last year, if you remember. So anything can happen.
Exactly. Anything can happen. You got to take your opportunities when you get them, and with the And honestly, like, I know this is an entirely homer pick. I'm picking the Maple Leafs. I'm not disguising that. Maple Leafs, they're in the playoffs, playing with house money at this point. I honestly don't care what happens. I hope they can pull it out. I hope they can win. And the thing that makes this more than just blind homerism is that the Capitals choke. Every year they choke. Sometimes it's in the first round. Sometimes it's in the second. I don't think they've gotten far enough to choke in the Eastern Conference Finals. But you know what? They always choke. And why not against the Maple Leafs? So I'm being a complete homer. But this is a team. This is a very, very good hockey team that has choked and lost series to teams they shouldn't have lost to before. So go Leafs, go.
Oh, I like your enthusiasm, and I would like nothing more than to see the Maple Leafs pull off the upset, but I think Washington makes quick work. I'm going to take the Caps in 5 in this one. I think you'll get one win at home, and that's going to be about it.
Toronto's going to sweep the series. It's going to be fantastic.
I think the Leafs have a shot if those demons come back for Washington, and if the Maple Leafs kids just kind of because they don't know how to be there. I mean, Austin Matthews is a 40 goal scorer. Mitch Marner can come alive. Is it Michael Nylander? Willie Nylander.
Willie's Nylander? Better name. I hope it's Willie.
It's Willie.
Well, yeah. It is now because that's just a better name than Michael.
Willie Nylander. Yeah, they're Michael.
Especially
Nylander
in hockey, you don't have a lot of Willies in hockey, so we need a Willie.
And I think those kids could maybe do something about it, but when you match up the defensive cores, Washington's better. When you match the goaltenders, Holtby's better than Anderson.
Well, and I'm looking at ESPN here.
I've seen firsthand Freddie Anderson could crumble under pressure sometimes.
Yeah, all you need is a goalie to get hot the right time. And you can do great things. And all you have to do is wait for a Washington Capitals choke job, which is an annual tradition. And I see no reason why it can't be in the first round.
I'm with Zach. I think I said it last week that this team is just young and dumb enough to go out and win because they don't know any better. I just don't think it's going to happen.
I think had they won that game against the Blue Jackets and played Ottawa in the first round, I'd be picking the Leafs all the way. But against the Capitals is a different story. I just think that they're too strong.
Yeah, I think I'm with you, Mike. I think the Capitals will choke, but not yet.
Yeah. They'll choke probably to the winner of this next series, which is Pittsburgh, Columbus. Columbus, an amazing season, of course. Nobody expected this from this war-torn franchise.
I don't care if you were the most hardcore Jackets fan in the world. Mm-hmm. If you say you expected this, you are lying. It's as simple as that, especially after last year.
50 wins, 108 points, an MVP caliber season from Sergei Bobrovsky, and an incredible power play at stretches during the season. The 16-game winning streak they had, all incredible. But the Penguins, the defending Stanley Cup champions, 111 points, 50 wins, and they did all this despite being continually decimated by injuries, as they always are, behind another MVP caliber season from Sidney Crosby. And for the Penguins to do what they did with the amount of injuries they suffered through, and they're not going to have Chris Letang, their star defenseman, the playoffs. Look, Columbus, they got off so hot and it was so amazing, but they have been pretty bad over the last few weeks, not going to the playoffs at the top of their game, and the Penguins are just the Penguins. And I think Columbus could give them a hard fight, and I want them to, and I want Columbus to win this series, which would probably make things easier for the Capitals in the next round. But I see it's hard to kind of look around the Penguins to kind of give the Blue Jackets their ultimate due, which, if this franchise can finally win a series and it being over the Penguins would be so huge in growing that team.
But it's not going to happen, and I agree with you. I think you're going to see – I hope the game's as exciting as they were 2 years ago. I don't think they will be, but I think you're going to see a very similar outcome. I think the Jackets have enough to win a couple of games in this, but – as good as they've been all season, when I've watched them, they just don't seem to have that gear that you need to be a real Stanley Cup contender. They're good. They're very solid. I'm trying to think of who they remind me of. I was going to say Minnesota, kind of. and that maybe they're not quite as good as their record, but I don't see them winning the series. They'd be great. They've certainly got the goalie that can get hot and pull it off, but I don't know, man. Can they hang with the Penguins when it comes to scoring? That's my question.
Maybe if their power play can work, but you don't get the same amount of power play opportunities in the playoffs that you do in the regular season. It's just not going to happen, and not against the Penguins. The Penguins are going to get the benefit of the doubt more often than not. Just simply because of who their captain is. Yeah, I don't know. I just think the Penguins are just better. Columbus has been great, but in a 7-game series, I just don't know if the Blue Jackets could pull out 4 wins.
And the Jackets do not have home ice advantage for this, right? No. That would make a difference too, but they don't. I think it's going to be, again, maybe not with the excitement of the 3-goal comebacks and all that like we saw 2 years ago, but I think it's going to be a very similar result. It's going to be a 6-game series, and Pittsburgh's going to win it.
And not that it matter, because the Penguins fans are going to fill up Nationwide Arena anyway.
Yeah.
So.
Ultimately, the Penguins have fixed their Achilles heel in the playoffs since the last time they played Columbus. Marc-Andre Fleury is no longer between the pipes, so
yeah, that makes a big difference.
That'll and so this is where I come back down from the optimism a bit, and it's like Pittsburgh's going to win this. Maybe I would have picked Columbus if they had ended their season better, but that's just not a great way to finish things out.
Well, Nick Foligno was really hot for a few months. I think he cooled off quite a bit towards the end there. I don't know where they're going to get the goals from, I guess, is my question.
Yeah, no, they're not necessarily a high-flying scoring team. The goal differential will tell you otherwise. But you got to remember, during that win streak when they beat a couple teams by 10 goals.
Yeah, I mean, they got a 20-goal pad to their differential there in just 2 games during that streak, Right. So I think they're headed in the right direction. I thought that 2 years ago, but we saw what happened. But maybe this time it sticks. But they're not quite there yet. Is the way I see it.
If the Blue Jackets win this series, it will be because of 2 things. Because Brandon Dubinsky chops Sidney Crosby's head off at some point, or Crosby just goes nuts and gets suspended for 3 games, or Sergei Bobrovsky steals 3 games.
Yeah.
in a series.
I mean, that's the one thing the Jackets have in their favor is that they've got a goalie that's certainly capable of getting hot in the playoffs, but I don't know, man. It's just it's been a great season, but I don't like the matchup. I just don't. I think it doesn't play well for the Jackets at all.
No, and that's where it's a little unfair to Columbus, because in the old format, let's see, they would be the 4th seed, I guess, and that would mean that they would have played
5th seed, right?
Well, because there's only 2 divisions now, so I guess that means that they would have played the Rangers, which maybe is a better matchup for them, but again, hard to tell.
Yeah.
But that's also hypothetical. But so the winner of that series, of course, would play Washington. So we think Pittsburgh, and if it's Pittsburgh-Washington, look, I want to give the Capitals their due. I want to say that the Capitals can do it, but it's the Penguins. It's not only the Capitals choke, but they just can't beat the Penguins. It's a mental block that they have, and I would still take Pittsburgh in that series to go to the potential Eastern Conference Final, right? If it's Washington Pittsburgh, it's Pittsburgh. If it's Washington Columbus, maybe you got a shot.
Here's what I think. Okay, should Columbus get past Pittsburgh somehow, and they get Washington, then you're in I can see the Capitals choking in this series because, they're going to maybe not take the Jackets as seriously as they should. And that one I think is prime for an upset. But I don't know that if they get Washington, if Washington gets Pittsburgh in the second round, forget it. They're done, I think.
Although, Greg, you're missing out on something that could happen.
What's that?
We could see an all-Bass second round Eastern Conference playoff series.
Oh, Jackets, Maple Leafs?
Yeah.
If you get 2 ups, you'd have the Jackets and the Leafs.
Hey!
Yeah.
That'd piss a whole lot of people off, I think.
Yeah, I don't know.
Imagine
know about
NBC if that's what they get. with you've got a Canadian team and Columbus, and people will be like, Columbus has a hockey team?
Yeah,
anyway,
that's the one that gets relegated to the annals of the NHL Network or CNBC.
Court TV.
Yeah.
I'm still surprised that CNBC shows hockey. Like,
yeah,
it's one of the NBC network of channels, and it's like,
yeah, but they're not putting teams on MSNBC. That would be hilarious.
Well, that's
coming
political.
Up right after Susie Orman and Money Talk, NHL Stanley Cup hockey. Yeah,
well, because CNBC, when the games start, it's usually after the trading day is done. So there's not a whole lot of money talk that needs to be done in the afternoons or the evenings, right? And but on MSNBC, they talk about politics deep into the night. The Rachel Maddow's of the world take over the airwaves there. So
right.
That's why that's done. And they've expanded it. They brought in USA Network and
I saw there's a whole list of channels here on the bottom of the page. Let's see, you got NBC regular, Sports Network, CNBC, USA Network, and NHL Network are the ones they're listing.
Yeah, and the NHL Network game for tomorrow night is Boston Ottawa, because NBC was like, oh, do we want to send cameras to Ottawa? Can we send cameras to Ottawa? So that's that.
Speaking of Ottawa, should we move up to that series?
Yeah, sure. We'll talk about the Ottawa Senators. The second seed in the Atlantic, they will take on the third-seeded Bruins. And I got to be perfectly honest, I know jack shit about the Senators team. I know that Guy Boucher was the coach, and he brought in his kind of trapped style. Craig Anderson was the goaltender, is having a really great season. I couldn't tell you who's scoring goals for this team. Not a whole lot, because they're the only team in the playoffs with a negative goal differential and -2.
I'm going to go out on a limb here and say Alexei Yashin doesn't play for them anymore, probably, right?
No.
I'm kidding.
Erik Karlsson still having an Erik Karlsson type season, really good. I've been told that he's committed more to the defense this season. Again, I don't know. I just haven't seen or heard a lot about Ottawa. And I don't know.
It's a house of cards, and it's going to fall, and it's not sustainable. So,
I was, you want to talk about knowing very little about them. I saw that they were the second seed and went, what? I didn't even know they were good this year.
No. They've just kind of quietly been sitting around there for a while, and they've been in the second seed for the majority of the season, as far as I can remember. And it's a weird thing. Craig Anderson is the emotional aspect for the Senators, too, because his wife was going through breast cancer, and he had to leave the team for a little bit earlier this season, and he's come back and played tremendously well, of course. And if Ottawa is to win this series, I think it'll be because of him. Otherwise, the Bruins have been playing really well down the stretch to kind of keep they're in the playoffs and secure that playoff spot. They ended up with 95 points, tied with the Leafs, but they had the tiebreaker. Again, just 1 point ahead of the two teams right outside the playoffs, too. So they've been fighting tooth and nail to get to where they are. And I just, like Mike said, I think that Ottawa's kind of a house of cards. If things start going bad for Ottawa early, like say the Bruins go in and win game 1 tomorrow, then I think the whole thing falls apart pretty quick for Ottawa.
Yeah, I like the Bruins in this. I mean, I don't know anything about Ottawa, but I just got to think the Bruins are going to win this series.
Yeah, the Bruins are bigger, stronger, faster, more talented, big names. I don't see any reason why they shouldn't.
Tuukka Rask is playing pretty well this year too, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
The Leafs and the Bruins were two of those teams vying for one of the last Eastern Conference playoff spots, and so I was following the Bruins as I was following the Leafs, and I could say, they have just been on fire the last month or so. So
yeah. And I actually don't want the Bruins to win, because I don't want to justify Bruce Cassidy behind the bench for them to say, hey, I want a playoff series, and then, have the Bruins kind of continue to just be dopes next season. But I don't know. This, of all the series, this is the one where this is the one I'm just not going to pay attention to.
Exactly. That's the way I see it too.
I'll watch the winner when they play the Montreal Rangers winner in the next round. I just don't care who wins this series, because whoever wins isn't going to go too far. And
we've talked about it a bunch of times on the show, but Mike, I mean, Ottawa, outside of, I don't know, half the people in Ottawa that are fans of this team, does anybody give a shit about this team? The Senators? I mean, I don't know. They seem so freaking irrelevant to me.
They're the third most popular team in their home city.
Right, that's what I'm saying. I don't know, but I think Boston, I think they make easy work of the Sens. Sorry, Ottawa fan or two. But
it's fine.
We've got a few decent Ottawa fans on the board.
God bless them. I mean, I'm not knocking them. I don't know. I just think that they're in a tough spot. You're there between Montreal and Toronto, trying to make a name for yourself, and they're the only Canadian team who started to do the you can't wear that jersey in here policy that the Sunbelt teams are fond of. So, you know what, Ottawa, you're embarrassing everyone else in Canada. Just stop it.
Yeah, of all the teams, maybe in the entire league, I think Ottawa is the team that I know the least about, despite them being the one in the playoffs. Like, I could probably tell you more about the Carolina Hurricanes than I could about the Ottawa Senators. This team has just kind of gone away from me this season, and I don't know what to do. But that series will play the winner of probably one of the more compelling series in the East, because I think this is one that could really go either way.
I think this is the series of the first round myself.
For me, it is in the East. I like one series out West a little bit better. But Montreal and the Rangers, the Canadiens, the Atlantic Division champions, 47 wins, 103 points, all-world goaltender Carey Price, Claude Julien behind the bench. Interesting fact about the Habs. When Michel Therrien was fired a few months back, the Habs led the league in penalties against. Since Claude Julien took over, in the period of time where he has been the coach of the Habs, they're the least penalized team in the league. So a really kind of strange turnaround there.
Yeah.
But he's gotten them playing better defense. Carey Price obviously is a big component of that too. They have some goal scorers. Max Pacioretty had a great season. They have a lot of talent up front. And they're a very strong team, and those games in Montreal are, of course, going to be nuts. And they will be going up against the New York Rangers, who have been kind of in stasis for the last 2 or 3 months. They kind of fell off the pace of Pittsburgh and Columbus, and they weren't ever going to be caught by the Bostons or the Torontos of the world. So they've been in that first wild card spot for a long time and have kind of middled their way through the last end of the season because they didn't really have anything to play for. They weren't going to catch anybody. They weren't going to fall. So they're in kind of a weird spot. But Henrik Lundqvist has had an okay season, not up to his normal standards. And they've had some strong seasons up in their forward ranks, but the Rangers are kind of that team in the middle, but they still have a Henrik Lundqvist, and they have a lot of talented players, and they're a team that matches up well with Montreal to make this one of the more compelling series of the entire first round.
Well, if you're a traditionalist and you like Original Six hockey, it doesn't get any better than this, really.
Beautiful.
For first round.
It's going to be a beautiful matchup.
Beautiful.
Like, from our perspective, just a nice-looking first round matchup.
So who do you like?
Probably the best looking first round matchup, just purely aesthetically.
Absolutely.
Yeah, probably. Yeah. As I skim everything else real quick.
You take the Habs and those home jerseys with the Rangers and the white on the road. I don't know if it can get any better looking than that, honestly, in the NHL. I just don't know how it would. That is a fantastic looking matchup.
That'll be pretty good. I like the Pittsburgh Columbus look too. I guess the only other one that was be kind of close is maybe Edmonton San Jose, but they're the third in that race because Edmonton's decided to wear the orange.
They decided to wear the orange, and I'm not entirely. Well, they're going with the orange full time next season.
Yeah,
right. So they're starting that this year, but we'll get to that when we get to it. But yeah, beautiful original 6 teams and just goaltending matchups. But I think if Henrik Lundqvist struggles a little bit, I know they're going to be reticent to pull the trigger on pulling him, but Antti Ranta is a pretty damn good backup, and he can maybe steal a game for the Rangers if they have to call on him.
I'll tell you right now, I'm picking the Rangers in this.
Really?
I got a little gun-shy about Montreal last season when Carey Price went down, and suddenly they went from the best team in the league to, like, absolute garbage. Not to say that I'm betting on Carey Price getting injured, but I think that kind of exposed Montreal as maybe they're not as high octane, I guess. Maybe they're not as dangerous as a lot of people made them out to be. And so I guess what I'm just saying is I like the way that the Rangers match up with them. You're right, Zach. Lundqvist hasn't been on fire, but he's still a world-class goalie. They've still got very potent offense, a very potent offense. So maybe it's an upset, but I think I like New York in this.
So are you saying basically with the Habs then, like if Carey Price isn't on top of his game, they become very beatable?
Yes.
Like they don't have that they can't. I won't say can't overcome that, but it would be very tough for them to overcome that. Is that okay? All right.
I think I'm going to go with the Habs, and I think that even if Carey Price falters, I still think that what Claude Julien has done with that team to make them a little bit more responsible, not taking as many penalties, and being just better defensively since he came around. You know, we talked a whole lot, obviously, in the offseason about the Shea Weber PK Subban trade, and it turns out that it ended up being a trade that worked for both sides.
It actually ended up, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, Shea Weber's been incredible with Montreal this year.
He's been incredible. He started off hot offensively, but even still, for his actual defensive skill set, he was more what Montreal needed and wanted, and he's solidified them, on the blue line. So I like that, and I like the skill that they have up front. Pacioretty's been great. You still have Galchenyuk and the rest of them, Gallagher. But I like Montreal. And Alexander Radulov is the other guy that's really he was quite maligned going back to the KHL and leaving Nashville and all that sort of stuff. But in his one season here with the Habs, he's been great, and he's brought another spark of offensive creativity to a team that desperately needed it.
I will say this: Gallagher really impressed me. I was actually at maybe a couple weeks back. I was at a Lightning Canadiens game in Tampa, and Gallagher, like I admit, the Habs have kind of been off my radar this season, so I really didn't know much about him. But he really impressed me just watching him play. That's a talented hockey player.
Yeah,
I know, but there you go.
I like a lot of what Montreal brings, and I think this is going to be a great matchup. The Rangers could muster something and overcome it, but I like the Habs in 6.
I'm with you with the Habs. I'd love to see my Rangers pull this off, but I don't know, man. I just again, I know very little about both teams. I know about Shea Weber, and how well he's played for Montreal. The Rangers, though. Didn't we talk about this last year where they seem to be kind of at this point where you look at
they're at the point where their window was closing.
Yeah, I mean, we were talking this, like we made the joke about the Capitals about saying the same thing last year, but I mean, aren't the Rangers kind of in the same spot they were in last year where
I think the Rangers are 1 year past due.
Yeah.
To be perfectly honest. Like, right. I'm surprised that they had the season they had.
Exactly.
Honestly, I think their window, like, their legitimate window to be a contender closed with that finals loss to Los Angeles. I think that was their shot. And
yeah.
It just hasn't really.
But I like the Habs. I'm going to take the Habs in 6 in this one too. As much as I like to see the Rangers win, but man, oh man, would I love to go to any one of these games.
Go Kitchener! Wait, no.
You have to give the Rangers a shot. You have to say, well, if Carey Price is off his game. But here's the thing: if Carey Price is on his game, Montreal is just going to be almost near impossible to score on, and they're going to be a tough out.
Yeah.
And so I put the of this grouping, this Atlantic Division playoff grouping, they're the favorite. If they beat the Rangers, there's no reason they shouldn't beat Ottawa or Boston. And Montreal should get to the Eastern Conference Final.
Well, I mean, you look down the list, I mean, all the way down the bracket, and really the only team that I think obviously the Capitals maybe and the Penguins, but that, I mean, if either one of those teams, I mean, they've got what it looks to me like is a pretty, I don't want to say easy, but their path is there where they could run right through this no problem.
Well, they got an easy path to the East Final at the very least.
Yes, exactly.
I would love a Toronto Montreal Eastern Conference Finals.
Oh, speaking of that game, I'd love to go to. Jesus, that'd be great.
Yeah. Well, I mean, what Canada wants, of course, is Ottawa to beat Boston, Montreal to beat the Rangers, then you get Montreal, Ottawa. Then they want a Cinderella one by Toronto, and they get Toronto, Montreal in the East Final.
Edmonton, Toronto would be the dream Stanley Cup final matchup.
Shit, I'd be all over that. That'd be fun.
No, the NBC Dream Stanley Cup this season, of course, is Calgary, Ottawa.
Oh, God.
Because at least with Edmonton, they could say, well, Connor McDavid, if you had Calgary versus Ottawa, it'd just be like, oh, man, is this happening? Like,
is Jerome McGinnis still on the team?
Right. It would be like, yeah, what's his name? Lanny McDonald to be this.
Lanny McDonald.
And his mustache.
Honestly, I think the legit preferred Stanley Cup matchup as far as NBC goes is probably Chicago against either New York or Pittsburgh.
Yeah.
Maybe Washington.
Oh, yeah. I think they take Washington, but they won't. They'd be wetting themselves over a Pittsburgh-Chicago series.
Crosby versus Kane. You could just see the commercials now.
Yeah, but ratings-wise, I would think they would want New York, Chicago. That's you've got two of the top 5
Pittsburgh
markets.
It's great ratings, though.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Pittsburgh does put up good hockey ratings.
That's those jerseys, man. They're fucking gorgeous.
Really, NBC's dream matchup is Chicago-Buffalo. Let's be honest. But anyway.
Oh, the poor Sabres, they didn't make it. I just realized that.
No, and Jack Eichel lost out on a $2 million bonus by 0.1%.
Ooh.
Yeah. Jack Eichel had a clause in his contract that needed to average so many points per game, and he missed out by 0.001 points.
Oh, my God. I would just give it to him if it were me, you know?
Well, he was injured at the beginning of the season. I think he only played like 61 games. So it's literally like he needed 1 point. He needed a third of a point somewhere in his season.
The guy with the second assist on a goal back in December and gave him all the money. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, well.
Anyway.
That's the way it goes. All right, so let's...
who's your favorite out of the East?
For me?
Who's your Eastern Conference champion?
I'm going to go with Montreal, I think.
Pittsburgh.
Yeah, I don't want it to be, but Pittsburgh... It's if they beat Columbus and they have Washington's number, I think they're just too strong.
Pittsburgh's Bama. Pittsburgh's the Patriots. It's hard to pick against them until they lose.
See, but I've got this thing where I've got a soft spot. I want a Canadian team to finally win the damn cup again.
Woo!
And I like the Habs. I'm not really crazy about the Penguins. Love their uniforms. That's about it. I'm going to go with Montreal out of the East. All right, moving on to the Western Conference, the home of Zach's Anaheim Mighty Ducks of Anaheim.
The West, yes. Just to get them out of the way, we'll talk about my Ducks, my scrappy little Anaheim Ducks.
Well, I wanted to bring that up. I thought about this when we were on a break there. At the start of the season, when we did our NHL preview, none of us thought our teams were going to make the playoffs this year. Like, you had the best shot, or it was like maybe, maybe not, and Mike and I were both like, nah, it's not going to happen.
Yeah.
And now we're all three here.
We're all three here. Columbus played above their heads. Toronto was very good. And the Ducks, somehow, some way, Randy Carlyle put them together to have just as good of a season as they've had under any of the Bruce Boudreau years. Not in the same fashion, but they got to their fourth 100-point season.
I'll tell you what the key was. The Ducks were smart enough to keep him away from toasters. It kept him focused. They kept him on task.
Yeah, we use toaster ovens rather than actual toasters.
That's good for Randy.
Yeah, he can just reach in and grab the bread.
So you've got Calgary in the first round here.
Yeah, fifth consecutive division title, and we get Calgary, the Flames, who have lost 25 consecutive regular season home games in Anaheim to the Ducks.
Wow.
And since that streak began, the Flames have won exactly one time in Anaheim, and that was a playoff game back in 2006. Besides that, the Ducks and Flames have played twice. Once in 2006 where the Ducks won a 7-game series, and then 2 years ago they played the Flames, and the Ducks won in 5 pretty easily. And look, I don't give a shit about the Calgary Flames, but it just so happened that when the two teams played, a week ago, that their captain, defenseman Mark Giordano, had a knee-on-knee collision with Cam Fowler, the Ducks defensive leader, and Fowler is out 2 to 6 weeks, and we don't know which one it's closer to.
Oh.
So in that game got really nasty really quick following
I'm
that.
trying to go for a foul duck hunting pun, but nothing's
Yeah. Pretty good to have a defense, Cam Fowler on the Ducks. But after that happened, that game got nasty really fast. And after the game, of course, when people were still talking, asking the players questions about it, there's still not a lot of love lost for the Calgary Flames. So I have a feeling that the Ducks are going to try to go just kick the living shit out of the Flames. And boy, do I want that to happen. I want Mark Giordano's head on a plate. Ducks in 5, kick the shit out of the Calgary Flames, who I just don't see a point on the ice where the Flames match up with the Ducks. Defensively, they don't. In goal, they don't. They have a lot of good forwards. They have a lot of good young forwards, speed, little sons of bitches that are just, kind of pesky guys. The only way that the Flames are going to beat the Ducks is to try and get in the Ducks' head, or if they somehow stretch it out to a Game 7 and the Ducks melt down somehow again.
Their Game 7 thing. Well, I'm looking at Calgary's their overall rankings. 16th in goals per game, 14th in goals against. I mean, that's as middle of the pack as you can get.
Yeah.
I mean, it's literally middle of the pack practically. Knowing very little about both teams, all I know is that the Ducks, I think, played better than anybody thought they were going to. I would take the Ducks in easy. I'm going to say 5 in this one.
Now, because Zach brought it up, the Calgary Flames are going to win the Stanley Cup, and Giordano's going to be the one hoisting the cup at the end of all of this.
I will go slice his Achilles tendons.
I'd like to see Calgary, but I don't want to see them do it at the Ducks' expense. Plus, I think that they're going to lose in 5. Go ahead, Mike.
I think the Ducks. I still don't know what to make of this Ducks team because they've been so all over the place this season.
Yeah.
So I don't know much about them, but this Calgary Flames team just reminds me of those Calgary Flames teams from the late 2000 aughts where they would sneak into the playoffs at an 8th seed and then do nothing. So that's kind of where I'm at with them. So Anaheim.
Yeah, the Ducks are also on they've found their game at the exact right time. They're on a 14-game point streak. They were 8-0-2 in their last 10. I think it was 14-3-3 in their last however many that is, 20 or so.
In their last 10, they finished 8-0-2.
Right.
With a 4-game winning streak to end the season.
Right. And the goaltending, whether it's Jonathan Bernier, the backup, or John Gibson, the starter, has been great down the stretch. The defensive unit has been very serviceable, and they've stepped up in big spots. Having Cam Fowler out hurts, but they dealt with a little kind of nicks and lingering injuries down the stretch with Tampa's Lindholm and Sami Vatanen, but they've come back. They're going to play. They'll be fine. Up front, Getzlaf turned. It was about he had a really rough start of the season, him and Perry, but about the 2/3 mark of the season, Getzlaf just turned on a switch and turned into the dominant Ryan Getzlaf that he could be at his best. And it kind of helped when he got Rickard Rakell on his wing, who's a 30-goal scorer. Patrick Eaves came over the trade deadline, and he's been probably the best trade deadline pickup out of anybody in the league. So he's been great. The second line's been strong. The Kessler, Cogliano, Silverberg line has been a great checking line that also scores. Just things feel like they're clicking on exactly where you want them to be. And I actually feel better about this team than I have about some of the other ones going into the end. I think a couple of years ago I was maybe super high on them, and I was just so confident that this team could have done great things. I'm not sure that they can get all the way, but I know they're playing the way that I would have liked them to play at this time. They're playing how I want them to go. So I have hopes. And I think, at least looking at the Pacific Division, if they play to their capabilities, there's no reason for them to not be in the Western Conference Final. In the Western Final, they might have to play Chicago, and that would be an entirely different animal, of course. But they're better than Calgary. They're better than San Jose. They're better than Edmonton. And there's no reason the Ducks shouldn't, move out of this thing. But we're all the Ducks, and they will play. What was the last thing you had to say there, Greg?
I was just going to say, I was looking at the numbers again, and if you're going into the series expecting to see a lot of shootouts, I wouldn't count on it. Both teams, like the Ducks, are 18th in goals per game, Calgary 16th, so probably not going to be a lot of scoring in this one, I'm guessing.
No, it's not going to be a shootout, but I'm strangely more confident in this team in tight games than I have been in some of the other ones. They're just, I don't know, they just came around to be a solid hockey team.
Well, they're third in goals against, which is, that's right. And I think Calgary is 14th. So just looking at the basic numbers, it seems like the Ducks should have no trouble with these guys.
Yeah, they shouldn't, but they've made
that analytics bull crap out of here.
They've made
right
harder on themselves than they need to in the past. So
I'm going too deep into the stats. With this team scored this many goals a game, and this team gave up this many. That's too deep, right?
Nerd.
But the other series,
I do want to point out though that with Zach picking the Ducks, Greg, you are the only person who's picked against his team.
I didn't pick against his team.
No, against his team, your team. You picked against the Blue Jackets.
Oh yeah, I picked
Toronto. Zach picked Anaheim. You picked Pittsburgh.
I'm in this thing to win it, man.
Really, Mike, you're the only one that's going on a limb. Really, I mean, is it so much on a limb to say the Ducks will beat the Flames? Probably not.
Yeah, and I don't think I'm really going out on a limb saying that Pittsburgh's going to beat the Jackets. I would love it for the Jackets to win that series, but again, I don't know where they're going to find the goals, and it just troubles me. But anyway.
Anyway, so the winner, probably Anaheim, hopefully. I don't want to count my chickens or anything, because God knows I did that last year against the Predators. And by the way, I am so incredibly glad that Nashville lost its season finale and that we're not playing the Predators. Because if the Ducks had to play the Predators again, I just didn't want any part of that. I just don't. I would have been having cold sweats for 2 weeks. Just no, thank you. But the Anaheim Calgary winner will play the resurgent Edmonton Oilers or Sharks. The Oilers, another team that people thought was going to improve. Connor McDavid, his first full season in the league. They thought they were going to be better. Maybe they would make the playoffs, maybe not. And they ended up going down to the last day of the season competing for a division title. 103 points, 47 wins. Connor McDavid, 100 points to lead the league and most likely the MVP of the league. If he's not, then there's something terribly wrong with the voting process.
He should win it. He should win it because the Vegas Golden Knights aren't playing this season for Bettman to rig the process in one of their players' favor. So.
Yes. Cam Talbot had a really good season in net for Edmonton. Maybe he was a little overworked. It's hard to tell, but Edmonton also finished the season pretty strong. They score a lot on the rush. So if San Jose is able to slow things down and maybe clog it up against them a bit, that's where you're going to have to do it. And if you can shut down McDavid, there's not a whole lot of secondary scoring on this team. Obviously they had a great season, but a lot of it's because of Cam Talbot in net and Connor McDavid up front. But if you can get those two things to work, who knows what you can get. If Connor McDavid's scoring 3 points a game against the Sharks, I don't know if it'll matter so much what the rest of the team does, right?
Well, Edmonton, I hate to go deep into the stats on you, Mike, but Edmonton's 8th in goals per game overall. So, that's not all McDavid, is it?
Look, get that analytics bullshit out of here. I go on gut feel like a real fan.
A lot of it's McDavid.
Looking at just the basic numbers, well, I don't know, man. We'll see.
Think about it. They scored 247 goals this season, and McDavid had 100 points. So he factored in on nearly half of the Edmonton Oilers' goals this season by himself.
Yeah, well, okay.
I remember the last time – well, I don't remember it because I was – barely alive at the time. But last time the Oilers had a world beater, once in a generational talent and made the playoffs, well, we all know what happened. I don't know. Connor McDavid, again, going out on a limb here. Connor McDavid's good at hockey. What?
Blasphemies.
I think he's and maybe it's because I'm just not familiar with the Sharks. I pay so little attention to the Western Conference, not out of any bias, but I just never get the opportunity to watch them. And so maybe I'm missing something about the Sharks, but the Oilers seem like they're on fire. It might be close, but I think the Oilers make it through San Jose at the very least.
I think so too.
I'm going with the Oilers also.
Yeah, San Jose, they've been okay, but they hit a big slump at the end of the season. Like, I think I told you guys both when we kind of looked at the standings at one point, I had given up on the division long ago.
Yeah.
The Sharks were well in front. They were playing well. They looked like they were as good as they've been in recent years. And then they hit a stretch where they ended up losing like 7 in a row at one point, and they just slowly were trending downward while the Ducks and Oilers kept rising up. And then San Jose fell, from first to third. Logan Couture is out. I don't think he's going to be starting the series as far as I know. Thornton was a little banged up towards the end of the year, and Marlowe was at a down season. Those two are probably at the very, very end of their careers. Like, this could be – they could retire, but I don't know if they will, but they're on their way out.
Also, I'm not convinced that the Sharks won't wear black again.
Yeah, well,
I got a feeling, man.
I think they learned their lesson, and I think they're going to stick with the teal. But Brent Burns too on defense was like third in scoring. He was right behind McDavid and Crosby for a long time, and then he went through like a 20-game stretch where he didn't score a goal. It just like the Sharks just stopped working at a certain point and fell down. So they're not playing well at the end of the season. I don't like how they're going, and why not? Edmonton's just going to be playing loose, happy, and fun, and they're out to make some noise. So
aren't the Sharks too kind of like similar to the Rangers in the sense that they're a little bit past their due date? I mean, I know they made the finals last year, but
maybe they're also a team that's done a really good job of kind of rebuilding on the fly.
Yeah.
Reloading, because it was Thornton and Marlowe, and as they were kind of going down, then you had the rise of Logan Couture and Joe Pavelski and Brent Burns, Mark-Edward Vlasic on defense.
Also, just
I think it's going to be a good series.
It's relevant to the discussion. There's some cry in Joe Thornton,
always, right?
Just for nostalgia's sake.
Yeah, I think
this could be a pretty good series.
I think this could be serious. I think this could go. It could go 7. I think it'll be 6. I like the Oilers just because of Connor McDavid and that offense can do a lot. And I just think I just don't like anything I've seen from the Sharks in the past month to suggest that they're going to turn it on when the playoffs come around.
I'm taking Oilers in 6. I think I've taken everybody. I had Ottawa on. Or who are you playing in the first round, Mike?
Washington.
I had Washington in 5, but the rest has been all 6. So I like the Oilers in 6 in this one too.
So then you got Ducks Oilers, and I think the Ducks are better than the Oilers. I think in a 7-game series they could beat them. But Connor McDavid could be playing out of his mind still, and the Ducks could just.
Well, don't the Oilers, aren't they kind of like similar to Toronto in the sense that they're young and dumb enough to actually go out and pull this off because they don't know any better?
I think the Ducks can do a good job of throwing a lot of Ryan Kessler at Connor McDavid and holding him down. And I think the Ducks
with his checks that no human can sustain.
Well, yes. And I think that the Ducks have more solid depth than the Oilers do overall. So I would still, obviously I'm going to pick Ducks to do everything, but trying to be as objective as possible, I still think the Ducks have advantages over the Oilers at every opportunity, and they can hold down McDavid because in his 2 seasons, McDavid, I think, has scored exactly 1 goal against the Ducks so far in 2 years. And a lot of that is because they keep throwing Ryan Kessler at him. And I think they can do a good job of keeping him in check and making the rest of the Oilers beat them. And I'm not really too afraid of Milan Lucic and Patrick Maroon, to be perfectly honest. So that's that.
All right.
And then
my St. Louis Blues.
Yes, your St. Louis Blues, Gregory, and they just might have themselves a shot because they play the Minnesota Wild, who are the 2nd seed in the Central Division, 106 points, 49 wins.
In the series that will destroy the universe.
Devin Dubnyk had a really great season for Minnesota. They did what Bruce Boudreau does, and they turned on their offense from a team that I didn't think could play as offensively up-tempo as they did. Eric Stahl had a rejuvenant season with the Wild. Zach Parise was great. But this Wild team also has the distinction of being the first full-season Bruce Boudreau coach team to not win the division title. They were in first place for a very, very long time, but they had a big slump, and the Blackhawks did what the Blackhawks do and just surged to the top and ended up winning the conference. For Schadenfreud's sake, I want Minnesota to lose because the Wild fans have gotten a little too uppity for my tastes. They think that it won't happen to them, but guess what? It can happen to you too, Minnesota.
I think the Wild are basically the Columbus Blue Jackets of the Western Conference.
Yeah.
I mean,
they are their expansion brothers.
But that's what I mean. I think that they've had a good season, but I look at them and I go, I don't see the gear. You got to have that gear, and I don't think they have it.
They ended the season on a particularly weak note, and just watching the Wild fans try to rationalize that's been entertaining in and of itself. It's like, this isn't a mentally weak team. They're just hitting a slump. Could you imagine if they weren't hitting a slump?
Yeah, our goaltending's been bad, but could you imagine if it wasn't? We stopped scoring goals, but could you imagine if we did?
So if things were completely different, they'd be different. Okay.
Yeah. But on the other hand, I said that this is good for the St. Louis Blues because they play the Minnesota Wild and Bruce Boudreau. But on the other hand, it's good for Minnesota because they're playing the St. Louis Blues,
right?
Who in their annual "Why do we even bother?" Gala.
They had a little bit of a resurgence once they fired Ken Hitchcock, but then they traded away Kevin Shattenkirk, and then they went into another mini slump. And they're a team that, I know that they have a lot of talent with, Vladimir Tarasenko and all that sort of stuff, but they kind of looked like they were just treading water for a very long time, and somehow treading water allowed them to move up the standings. They were on the outside looking in, and they've slowly kind of weaseled their way up to that third seed in the division. Jake Allen, I don't know if I have any confidence with him in nets.
I have no confidence in this team at all. And
no, I don't.
Yeah.
No.
You know what? I have confidence in the St. Louis Blues, and I'll tell you why. They are playing a Bruce Boudreau coach team in the playoffs. I'm picking the Blues in 7.
Oh, see, you took my thunder. But look, I have a little bit more confidence in Minnesota than I do the St. Louis team. They just haven't shown me anything that's kind of the same way. I equate the St. Louis right now with the Sharks. Not necessarily that they had the same big slump, but they haven't shown me anything to suggest that they're going to be able to muster up a victory here. And, you thought after what they did last season when they finally made the Western Conference Final and they had the big win against Chicago, that this was going to be it for the Blues. They were on the rise. They had broken through, and they didn't do anything with it. They did nothing with it. This was the Blues' time, and it just all of a sudden wasn't. So it was
never going to be the Blues' time. Best case scenario, they make the Cup Finals and get steamrolled by Pittsburgh last season anyway. It doesn't matter. Yeah,
as much for the fun irony that it would be to have Bruce Boudreau lose again and in a Game 7, and it would just validate me as a Ducks fan, makes me feel a little bit better. I don't think he'll do it in the first round. I think that they'll beat the Blues. They'll be able to go on to the second round. And as I've said, it made a little bit more sense when the Wild were going to be the division winners, because then they were going to have to play Calgary or Nashville or whatever, and they would have moved on to the second round and all that, and then they could lose to Chicago on home ice. They won't be able to lose to Chicago on home ice, but I like Minnesota getting through to the next round. And spoiler alert, to lose to the Blackhawks.
I like the Wild in this series, and Mike, you said it was going to go 7.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know that. Here's the way I see this series. It's either going to be a fairly entertaining 7-game series, or it's going to be a very short series. I don't see I don't know. I'm going to take
honestly, even if it's just because it's a long series doesn't mean it's going to be entertaining.
Well, yeah.
I think this will be a 6-game dull series with Minnesota winning.
I'm going to go with the Wild, and I'm going to really go out on a limb. I'm going to say the Wild in 5.
Oh, no. I mean,
that's just a total gut instinct call, but I just think the Wild in 5. I wish that, again, using the Columbus comparison, I think they've got a much better matchup. They match up much better with St. Louis than Columbus does with Pittsburgh. So I like the Wild in 5 in this one. But I wouldn't get excited, Wild fans. I think that's going to be about as far as you go.
Yeah, I agree. And especially because they'll play the winner of Chicago and Nashville. And this is the series that I'm looking forward to in these playoffs. Chicago and Nashville, two teams that really don't like each other a whole lot. You got a lot of things to like with Nashville. P.K. Subban and the offensive production that they've had there from some of their younger players. Philip Forsberg in particular has been insane this season. Pekka Rinne's had a bit of a drop off in net. But their backup is, I think his name is Saros, has had a pretty good stretch of things lately. And they're going up against, it was funny for a long time. The Blackhawks looked like they were just having kind of a middling Blackhawks season where they were going to make the playoffs, but they weren't world beaters of any sense. And somehow or another, they made it to the top of the conference, 109 points, 50 wins. And based on the Vegas odds, they're the favorites to win the cup going into the playoffs right now. I don't know if I see that from this Blackhawks team. They just seem that they're a little under the radar, if that's even possible for the number one seed in the conference. But I think this is going to be a great, entertaining series that could go either way ultimately. But yeah, with like Mike is with the Patriots, I am with the Blackhawks. I picked them until they don't win anymore. I think the Blackhawks win this series. I hope it's a good, entertaining series, but I think they take it in 6. Didn't they play each other last year? These two. It was 2 years ago, I believe. That was a series that was entertaining as hell. With there were 2 triple overtime games. Just the back and forth in that series was incredible. That was a great series.
But I'm with Vegas. I won't go out and say too early here, but I don't disagree with Vegas's take on the Blackhawks. But I like the Hawks. I think in this one in 6.
Blackhawks.
They've got the gear that I've been talking about. The Blackhawks have the gear.
They've finished the season in just the right way that they needed to finish the season, and I honestly don't think Nashville has quite enough to beat them in a 7-game series. So
I don't think Nashville will beat them either. I think it'll be tight though. I think this could be a very entertaining series.
If I remember right, the last time they played, didn't Nashville get out to a lead in the series, and then the Blackhawks?
It was a 2-0 series lead, and then the Blackhawks won 4 straight.
Yeah,
so.
But I think it'll be entertaining too. But I just, like I said, I've been saying like so and so doesn't have the gear. The Blackhawks have the gear that you need. They're a team
that's true.
Yeah, so I like the Blackhawks in 6 in this one.
Yeah,
which matches them up in my bracket against the Minnesota Wild.
Yes.
Oh, that's going to
be I think Chicago in 6 too. Did you make an official declaration, Mike?
Chicago.
In.
Oh, I haven't been picking games. I haven't been picking. Well,
don't worry about that.
I don't know. 5.
5 sounds good. Okay.
So.
Greg and I have with the analytic stats. Jeez.
Greg and I have Chicago, Minnesota, and I think that this series could be quite short, and these two teams have played way too much recently. But again, just for the sheer making me laugh of it, Chicago in 7, just because.
Over the Wild?
Yeah.
In 7?
Because I want to see Bruce Boudreau losing in Game 7.
Oh, I see. Okay, I got you.
Even though it would be on the road, so it's not the same thing. If they lose in 6 or 7, I'm good with that. I think that it'll be shorter. I don't even know if Minnesota could take 2 games from Chicago.
I was going to say, is there a way this thing can only go 3 games? But
I would say Chicago in 5. I think Minnesota pulls one out somewhere, but
that would be heartbreaking for Minnesota to take them all the way to 7 games and lose. Wow.
See, in my bracket, in my bracket, I've got Bruce Boudreau losing in 7 in the first round.
Right. So
and then
that's St. Louis, and that's a sweep.
That sets up Chicago, St. Louis, and that's where we hold our annual St. Louis Blues. Why do we even bother gala?
Yes, which tickets are being printed as we speak.
Yeah, whether it's in the first or the second round, basically one way or another, Chicago is winning that central portion of the bracket. Mm-hmm. They're beating Minnesota or St. Louis easy, and they'll beat Nashville too.
So we're looking at
the only team that poses any threat to them is Nashville, and if they can get them out of the way first, it's just going to be
right. And then so that would put for all of us Chicago and Anaheim in a Western Conference final, and that's where I get to butt clenching time. That's
where you have to face the T1000 again.
Here's the thing. So the Ducks played the Blackhawks twice this season, and the Ducks beat them by a collective score of 5-0. They won both games.
Nice.
They won the first game 1-0 in Chicago. It was a tight game, very, very competitive, a very defensive-oriented affair. Then last week, Chicago had everything clinched up, nothing to play for, so they played the Ducks in Anaheim while the Ducks were still chasing a division title, and the Blackhawks sat Taves and Seabrook and Keith and Hjalmarsson, and basically it was Patrick Kane, Artemi Panarin, and the rest of the Blackhawks.
So I really can't gauge anything from that game at all.
No, but they won 4-0, and I think that they played very well. Basically, I think they match up very well against each other. They won't let either one get too far away from the other. I don't know though if I can go all the way to pick the Ducks against the Blackhawks. This is one where it's just like I don't know. I don't know if the Ducks have enough. And again, Chicago hasn't impressed me all that much this season, so I don't feel like they blow away them either way.
My feeling on it is that with this series, like 2 years ago, I say that the Blackhawks easy, but this year I don't know, man. It's that's a tough spot to be in.
Yeah, this is the one where I really have no definitive look. Maybe it's because probably because I'm too in the bag for the Ducks to pick them to lose. But I think even if the Ducks lose this, it won't be quick. It would be in 6 or 7.
See, this is one where I'd have to see one game, then I could pick it. Then I could go, okay, one game I can get an idea, but right now I just don't know.
Well, the thing too, of course, it's hard as I just said is. It's hard to take anything out of that season series because there was only really one game where they were playing competitively against each other, and that was also back in early February. So it's hard to say for me.
I don't know. Mike, who do you like in that one?
Ducks, Blackhawks?
Yeah.
That is tough. I'm just going to default and say the Blackhawks just because I know the Blackhawks can beat the Ducks, and I don't know if the Ducks can beat the Blackhawks in the playoffs. So
see, that's my thing too. Like I think the Ducks are good enough, and I think they can. I just don't know if they would. is kind of the problem, and that's the same thing that happened when they played in the Western Conference Final 2 years ago. The Ducks were good enough to beat the Blackhawks, they just didn't. And that was because they faltered away Game 6 on the road and then got blown out of Game 7 at home, like they've done every one of the last 4 years.
My thing with it is that I don't know if it's because I want the Ducks to win, and I mean I don't have a thing against the Blackhawks, but enough already. And it's like clouding my judgment. But I'm gonna go with the Ducks. I think that if we get the series, I think the Ducks take it this time. Just because, if for no other reason, they don't have the Boudreaux thing hanging over their heads this time around, and maybe that changes everything. Who knows?
Like when it happened, you guys know that I just wanted to be the biggest non-believer in Randy Carlyle, trying to this team and doing anything. But I don't know how to explain it really. I mean, I've seen them kind of come together and just play better in a lot of different facets, but there's just something that he's done to this team to make them feel much more solid than any of Boudreaux's teams did. Like Boudreaux's teams were very, very good, but this team just feels like it's very built and solid up and down the lineup. Because I have to, because I'm bound by law. I'm going to pick the Ducks. I cannot give you a game number. It's 6 or 7. It's not going to be easy. It would be a very tough series, but at the end of it.
I don't like picking a 7-game series because I honestly, when you're picking a 7-game series, you're basically flipping a coin at that point.
Yeah.
I think if they get to this point, I think the Ducks. I shouldn't say I think. I'm hoping the Ducks will win it in 6. I don't know if they will or not, but I'm hoping they do.
I think that too. If the Ducks are going to win, it's going to be in 6. It's going to be on home ice, and they'll say, "Look what we did the last 4 years. We're not doing this garbage again. We're not going to a Game 7. We're going to end this right here and now." And that's where I would be, kind of confident in them mustering it up.
So we have.
I think, Mike and I have Pittsburgh coming out of the East. You have Montreal.
Yep.
And Mike, you picked Chicago, right?
I did, yeah, but it was basically just a coin flip where it was. I really honestly don't have a strong answer one way or the other, so I kind of just defaulted to history.
So I have my final would be Montreal against the Ducks, right?
Zach?
Yeah, sorry.
My finals Montreal, Anaheim, then basically. Oh boy,
yes.
They kicked my ass right out of NBC's building for that shit. I'm sorry, Zach. I got to get off the train at this point. I think the Habs take it home. We finally we break the curse of '93, and my beloved Canada finally brings the cup back home where it belongs.
If it's Pittsburgh Ducks, like I just said, oh man, the Ducks have not had a good time against Pittsburgh in these recent years. The Crosby years have not been very good to the Anaheim Ducks.
If anybody's interested, there is a fan at the Blue Jays game wearing a Maple Leafs jersey.
Woo!
Yeah. All right. Anyway, go ahead.
Shit, man. Like I don't want to pick my team to lose.
Well, don't pick them to lose. Don't worry about it. There's no. We're not bound by law or anything here.
There's no consequences, but I just don't want to put that bad omen in the air. Pittsburgh is too tired from going through the gauntlet they had to go through in the East. Ducks win in 3. Ducks win. No, I guess. Who would have home ice in that series? Penguin. Ducks in 6, so they could win the cup on home ice.
Mike, who do you like?
I've got Pittsburgh versus Chicago. Oh man, Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh. Yeah, I've got Pittsburgh winning it.
See, we haven't had a repeat Stanley Cup champion since the Red Wings of the early 90s or whatever.
Late 90s, 97, 98.
90, yeah, right. And it's just this Pittsburgh team is one that's just been so beat the hell up over the last couple years, but they still just managed to keep doing it. And I think a Pittsburgh-Chicago series would be a great way to kind of end this era in a way. Because, look, one way or another, the next era is already beginning with the Connor McDavids and the Austin Matthews and all that sort of stuff. So NBC will have to cry a little bit eventually with a Edmonton-Toronto Stanley Cup final. But I think just over the last 10 years or so, a Pittsburgh-Chicago Stanley Cup final would kind of be the cap. Like, that would be the last thing that we've needed to see from this generation of players. Mm-hmm. And, as much as I'm going to pump up the Ducks and say they're going to do it, I think in a realistic sense, I like Chicago, Pittsburgh, and, man, that would be a drag out. That would be great. That would be really, really fun. And
that would be some fantastic hockey.
I think I would have to go Chicago of the two.
If it's Pittsburgh, Chicago, I would take the Blackhawks as well.
Yeah.
Yep.
So we have 3 different winners. Mike has the Penguins. I have the Blackhawks, and or the Ducks, depending on which way we're going to go with this. And Greg, you've picked the Montreal Canadiens
or the Blackhawks, depending on. So we've all made very bold, strong predictions.
It definitely won't be Ottawa.
I think the two things I can say for certain are it will not be Ottawa, it will not be Calgary, it won't be Minnesota or St. Louis.
Yeah.
Really, there's 4, 5 teams that are legitimate cup contenders, I think.
Let me see here. Okay, 1, 2,
Washington, we got Washington, Pittsburgh,
3,
Montreal,
4, 5. I'm going to go with you 5.
Indiana.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah. You know, depending on how much you think of the Ducks, obviously think a bunch of them, but there's at least 3 in the East: Washington, Pittsburgh, Montreal. I think those are your 3 legitimate cup-worthy teams. And then Chicago, of course, and then, you know, mileage may vary on what you think of the Anaheim Ducks. But 4 or 5, however you want.
I'd agree. I would agree. It all gets underway tomorrow. The Stanley Cup Playoffs, there's your predictions and our analysis there. And follow us on Twitter at Basically Sports. You can subscribe via iTunes, the Stitcher, the YouTubes, and the Spreakers. And you can also find us on the Facebook. And with that, I'm going to say, go Jackets.
Go Leafs, go.
Go Ducks.